Welcome back to the Mom with a Calling podcast. Today I have special guest Michelle Grosser on the show. Thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so just to get us started, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Michelle Grosser, as she mentioned. I live in Miami with my husband, and we have two daughters, Amory and Ashton. They are now 5 and 7. And for the better part of the last 15 years-ish now, I've been a trial attorney here in Miami. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, like so many other people, probably a lot of you listening, I just had an opportunity to slow down and really reassess a lot of the things that I was doing, really get honest about why I was doing them or maybe not doing them. And I was just kind of hearing the same things from a lot of my friends and family members and people in our church. The women just feeling so overwhelmed, and now we're homeschooling while we're parenting and trying to work, and our marriage feels like it's on the rocks because we're together 24/7 and everyone's stressed out. All these things that a lot of us have experienced. And then I just really felt a call to somehow pour into that space. And it was one of those 3 a.m. moments where I feel like God just woke me up and he's like, start a podcast. And I'm like, okay, but I'm a lawyer. Like, I don't know how to talk about any of this stuff. I have no idea. Like, I know how to use my brain to like analyze things, and I'm very logical, and like I am very uncomfortable with feelings, and I don't know how to help women. So as he does, I think so often if we step out in obedience before we have any confidence, he will then line everything up and confidence will come after. So I signed up for a year-long master coach certification program with this thought that I would just learn some tools so I could kind of help women on the side as a hobby. Little did I know that my whole world would be turned upside down. How I see the world was completely shifted. It took a 180. And since then, I have been coaching high achieving women and really helping them learn how to regulate their nervous systems to overcome anxiety and overwhelm and burnout. And then about 2 years ago, also kind of a random way in which it started that I never saw myself, my husband and I planted a church. So now we pastor a ministry here in Miami that's now almost 2 years old, and it is growing, and it's my favorite thing to do when I'm not coaching. So I kind of have my hands in a lot of different projects these days.
Wow, I cannot even imagine trying to do all those things. That's amazing. And I hope people can understand obviously why you're here, because I think a lot of the women, I know a lot of the women that are listening are high achieving women, and sometimes, and we'll get into this, but like for me, like leaving that and then coming home and being a stay-at-home mom and stepping into maybe pulling back from a lot of that caused a whole bunch of stress and
Yeah.
dysregulation, and like you just don't even realize the things that you're used to doing. So I love that you said yes. Like it's so easy when we are on one path, like, no, God, I'm doing law, I'm good, like I don't need to start a podcast, I don't even know what this is about. And then that led, probably, I'm assuming, to the ability to say yes then to planting a church. So I
Right.
love that journey. Okay, so as you said, you got into this nervous system, understanding how we regulate. And was your coaching focused on that, or was it just a life coaching? Um, was it a specialty in nervous system stuff? Like, how does that go together? How did you get into that?
Yeah, so it started out more so just life coaching, and then I would say for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, it's really just been focused on nervous system because I found that women were coming to me, they were wanting help with habits and systems and productivity, and like I'm not tired all the time, like teach me new ways. But really, the underlying theme to all of the messages that I was getting from women and all of the complaints was really rooted in the regulation of their nervous system. So I found that if I could help them with that foundation, it was so much easier for them to then implement all the other things that they knew they wanted to do, but were kind of feeling stuck and unable to get to.
Yeah, so I know people are wondering, like, what does it look like? How do you tell if your nervous system is dysregulated?
Yeah. So there are so many different signs and symptoms of dysregulation. Our body is always communicating with us, right? So a lot of these signs, I think, are things that we have come to think of as our personality, when actually they're things that we've picked up and been conditioned to and patterned into for a long time, right? Since childhood. It's why the Bible tells us, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, right? So every day it's like, Lord, transform my mind, renew my mind. And a lot of the things that we're struggling with, we don't realize are rooted in nervous system dysregulation. So I usually think about it in three different categories. One is that it shows up in a lot of our mental health. So things like just being tired all the time, right? We have kids, we work a lot. We like, of course, we're chronically fatigued, but we're talking about a tiredness that doesn't resolve with a good night's sleep. It's like waking up tired at 2 p.m. I'm up at 3 a.m. and I'm wired and I don't know why. And then that cycle kind of repeats itself. A lot of brain fog. If you find that you have trouble concentrating, you're forgetful, you're kind of going into a room, opening the fridge, you're like, why am I here? That can be a sign of dysregulation. Spacing out, dissociating, that drive home after work, you get home and you're like, holy moly, how did I even get here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a sign. Procrastinating. A lot of us get really hard on ourselves about procrastinating. We think it's a lack of discipline or a lack of willpower, but that's a classic symptom of being stuck in a freeze response, right? When we talk about our nervous system stress responses. There's also emotional symptoms. So a lot of things like the anxiety that we can experience, or the stress, or the overwhelm, emotional volatility, feeling edgy, irritable. Those are all signs of dysregulation. Burnout. When I'm dealing with high achieving women, that's probably one of the main reasons that they come to me, right, is burnout. And then there's also physical symptoms. So if you're someone who's struggled with gut issues or migraines or IBS or autoimmune conditions or chronic joint pain or jaw pain or neck pain, we know that a lot of these things are affected by stress. But when we're under chronic stress, it really leads to our nervous system being stuck in a state of dysregulation, and it manifests in so many different ways.
Like you just listed a lot of things that I've experienced and so
Yeah.
many people do, right? And it's it's unnerving or something to hear, and it's maybe hopeful in some ways, but to hear,
Yes.
oh, this is just my personality, because maybe somebody's been trying to fix that part of their personality, or and like we'll get into this a little bit, but like doing the mindset work, like sometimes it is that. But if it's something that's kind of hidden, like if you're not aware that it's a nervous system regulation issue, then you're kind of not fighting an uphill battle, but you're like looking in the wrong place. You're like over here trying to do something and it's not doing any good whatsoever. So I'm excited to talk about this more. And I'm sure people are like, okay, but now what? So what do you do when you realize that's happening? I know that's way bigger than we can talk about on this podcast. That's what
Yeah.
you do, but can you give us like an overview?
Sure. So I think the first thing is just being grateful that you're growing in the awareness of what's going on in your body, right? And why some of these things are showing up. Because I think, one, that allows us to approach ourselves with a much deeper level of compassion. I think we can get really frustrated with ourselves. But when we realize, like, wow, I'm not just lazy or scared or whatever it is, like there's something deeper going on here, we can approach it with more compassion. And I always tell my clients that awareness always precedes choice, right? If they're not aware of anything that's going on in their body or why, there's nothing they can do about it. So just having this awareness, this new curiosity that's maybe being spurred, listening to this episode, that's a huge step. That's the first step. And then when it comes to regulating our nervous system, the way I like to teach it is that there are kind of big overarching foundational lifestyle things that are just so important for a regulated nervous system. And there's three that I like to teach that I think have a huge ROI off the bat. And I can share those. And then there's also kind of like in the moment, more acute solution. So if I have to, give a presentation, or I'm trying to pitch a client, or I'm speaking on a podcast, right? And I'm feeling like my chest, that my heart's racing and my breath feels shallow and my voice sounds cracky. What are some things that I can do in the moment to bring safety and calmness to my nervous system, so that I have access, right, to my prefrontal cortex, the part of my brain that allows me to show up in the best way that I want to in all of these different scenarios, and really regulate my system that way. So it's kind of like the big overarching foundational lifestyle stuff, and then also having tools in the moment to be able to bring regulation to your system.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, what are those three that you said are the big ones?
Yeah, so the three big ones, and the way I teach it, because I work with busy moms, is each of these I recommend starting with just 10 minutes a day. So it's 30 minutes. And if you can commit to doing these three things for at least 10 minutes a day, you're going to notice a massive shift in the state of your nervous system. The first one is incorporating at least 10 minutes of stillness every single day. So many of us who are high achievers, right? So many of us who are so productive, go, go, go all the time, like society rewards that. We have all, the plaques on the wall and the accolades and all the letters behind our names and all of this stuff. People are so proud of us, but there's a cost to that, right? We are exhausted. We are overworked. I mean, I don't need to tell you, you guys can probably relate. And I definitely lived there for a very long time. So our nervous system is familiar being busy, even though it's not best for us. It's familiar, so it feels safe. So learning how to lean into the discomfort of slowing down and becoming more comfortable with stillness, even starting with just a few minutes a day, if that feels really uncomfortable. Our nervous system needs stillness. We are overstimulated as a people, especially as moms. That causes dysregulation in our system. So learning how to be still and basically exercise the muscle of calmness in our nervous system is what we're doing there. So what am I talking about when I say stillness? I'm talking about prayer, maybe journaling, maybe listening to calm music without having a podcast or an audiobook coming, right? No stimulation, no information. Going for a walk around the block, again, without your phone, without your earpods. Meditation, just focusing on your breathing, things like that. Just laying or sitting for 10 minutes without doing anything is so healing for your nervous system. It's a practice that has a high payoff. The second thing is at least 10 minutes of movement every day. So it's really important for so many reasons in the regulation of our nervous system that we move our bodies every day. And it doesn't have to be CrossFit, and it doesn't have to be, running sprints. It can just be walking around the block or stretching or doing Pilates or anything like that. But just allowing our bodies to move and release a lot of that stored up energy and tension when when our nervous system perceives any sort of threat or stressor. The first thing that we do is we kind of brace, right? We're like brace for impact. So you'll notice when you're feeling stressed, right, that you have a lot of that tension in your jaw, in your neck, in your shoulders, in your back. So just moving can really be helpful in moving a lot of that stuff through. And then the third one is my favorite one. And it's ensuring that we, as full-grown women, get at least 10 minutes of play in every single day. And it's not necessarily like playing with our kids, although it could be, but it's just going back to the things that we can get really excited about and things that make us feel alive and passionate. And maybe it's playing an instrument, maybe it's taking out your skateboard, maybe it's shooting hoops in the driveway, maybe it's baking, maybe it's, taking out a canvas and painting. It could be anything. Just dancing in your kitchen for 10 minutes a day can completely shift the state of your nervous system. But man, if you can incorporate those three things, stillness, movement, and play, you're on a good roll.
So I feel like, I mean, movement, I feel like people can get behind that one, right? But I feel like stillness and play are things that this is where I'm wondering, the intersection with mindset, because we are telling ourselves it's not okay to sit still. It is not okay to play. We have things to do. We are responsible. There could be a whole slew of thoughts that are behind that. Because even, I don't know if anybody else listening is reacting, but the thought of playing, because we say with our kids, but you modify or you qualified that because if you enjoy it and it really is play, it's play. But playing with your kids to appease your kids is not play, right? Unless you truly enjoy whatever it is you're doing. Like I homeschool my son, and sometimes we will watercolor together, and that's truly play for me. Like it's fun. But when he wants to build Lego sets and I'm the one building, no, it is not fun. It is annoying. Like I have
Yeah,
to build this Lego set because you're not wanting to build the Lego. That's not playing, right?
right.
So can you
Yep.
talk about that part? Like I just feel like these are things that we, and I say this a lot on the podcast, like the things that got you ahead in the world in your career are the things that really can hold us back as entrepreneurs. And when you're trying to be at home and when you're trying to like do this, right? And you realize that like the Bible says differently, God says differently. He doesn't ask us to be so striving and hustling and throwing ourselves in things all the time. So can you
That's
speak to
right.
that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, be still and know, right? It's like that's like something
Exactly.
I'm always, especially in those moments, I'm like, okay, I'm following, I'm being obedient actually in this moment of stillness. Okay, so two things are coming to me in response to what you just mentioned. The first is that because we are so patterned and rewarded by a lot of these things that we do, just that we're conditioned to do to be high achieving, being productive all the time, busy all the time, ahead of the curve all of the time, constantly seeking that next thing, all of these big goals, measuring our self-worth very often by our productivity, right?
Mhm.
I think it's a matter of, this is what I would ask myself if I were someone that's like, but wait a minute, isn't this so good for me? I would list out all of the reasons or all of the ways in which that habit, let's say, if you will, or that part of my personality has really served me well. So let's say being someone who like is high achieving, right? It served us well in so many ways. It's rewarded by society. We get a good paying job. We can afford to do things with our family, like whatever it is. And then we ask ourselves, okay, in what ways is this pattern holding me back? Well, maybe I don't have really good work-life balance, or maybe I'm exhausted all the time, or maybe, there's the cost is actually starting to outweigh the benefit and I can feel it in my body or whatever it is. Because the thing is, a lot of these things, we can set boundaries and parameters around them and we can keep the good, but then we just put safety nets around the ways in which they're
Mhm.
not serving us anymore, right? So we can like hold it without eliminating it altogether, but put some good boundaries around it. So that's the first part of it. And then I think the second part of it is really just getting to a place where it's okay to reevaluate and become critical about these things that these stories, right, that we tell ourselves. Wait, it's bad to rest. It's lazy to rest, right? That's a story that a lot of us have. It's lazy to rest. I know for so long, once I realized it, I'm like, if I was laying on the couch and like I heard the door, my husband was coming home from work, I would like hop up off the couch and like look like I was doing something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I like where did that start? It started somewhere,
Mhm.
right? It's just a pattern that I have. So starting to ask ourselves, like, is that true? Or like who said, right? Who said that being restful or resting for 10 minutes is lazy? Where did that come from? Is that actually true? Right? Is that biblical? Does the Lord actually say this? Or is this something that I've been conditioned and picked up or social media or society or whatever? And I'm at a place where I'm like, you know what? I'm willing to unpack this a little bit and rethink this a little bit because this might not be serving me as well as I think it does.
No, it's so good. And I think that I always say too, like that the enemy is really good at twisting
Yes.
what's for good. So like
Yep.
rest is good and it can get either it's like we'll just swing on this pendulum. Either,
Yes.
you feel guilty for sitting down or you will be too restful, like never work, never doing like just not doing
That's right.
anything. Or the moment you rest, right? It's like the need to just kind of get up. And I've definitely done that, especially as a work at home mom, mostly stay at home mom. It's like if my husband, like when 4 o'clock hits, I'm like, my husband's going to be home in an hour and a half. I need to look like I did something today. Now,
Yes.
sometimes that really is based on I haven't done any, like it's been kind of chaos with kids, or whatever. But yeah, I just think that I don't know, like that intersection of those things. And what's coming to mind is that, like you were saying, like because of the way we've been conditioned, we don't even realize that that's not normal or not the way it needs to be. And so I
Right.
know you talked about a whole bunch of symptoms that like do you find that with clients it's hard to for them initially to recognize that they're dysregulated because it feels so normal?
I don't think so because I think they know that they feel off. Usually by the
Mm,
time they come to me, they're like, I'm just so tired. Like I remember a time, whether it's pre-kids or like whenever it was, where I just remember like having more energy. And I remember not having my body just feeling better. And I remember being more clear and getting more excited about things and not being an angry mom that's just snapping at my kids all the time. And they kind of have that memory of this person that's still within them, right? It's just been kind of covered with all of this sludge of everyday life that we just learn to strip away, and our nervous system heals. But I think, as you grow in awareness, you'll start to catch it quicker when you feel like you're becoming dysregulated. But for the most part, we can remember and note what it feels like, a moment in our life or in our day to day where we do feel really at peace. And it's like, wait a minute, you're telling me that that's actually available for me like all the time, not just in these fleeting moments. And it's yes, right? And we know when we're not feeling that. We know when we're feeling really anxious or overwhelmed or burned out or what have you.
Yeah. So then what is it? So we can picture here and we can probably all identify how it feels to be kind of dysregulated and the effects of that, right? We can just kind of understand that. So what are the benefits then of being regulated and how that can affect us in our businesses as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, sure. So being regulated, I guess, big picture, first of all, is that the name of my podcast is The Calm Mom. And like, I really struggled with naming it that because I did not want to be part of this cycle or this system that's like perpetuating this idea that we have to be calm all the time, because that's actually not a very healthy nervous system. A nervous system that is healthy and a nervous system that is resilient is a nervous system that is flexible. So when it's appropriate for me to respond with like an activated energy, like let's say my kid's about to walk into the street, right? Or about to like touch something hot on the stove. I want to be prompted into my sympathetic nervous system so I can just like fight or flight and like protect my child. It wouldn't be healthy if I was like, oh, hey, like don't walk into the street and be calm about that. That's actually not very healthy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And right. So a healthy nervous system is resilient. I can get into that state when I need to fight or flight or freeze or fawn or whatever. But my nervous system has the ability, it doesn't get stuck there. I have the ability to come back to baseline stress level. So that's a regulated nervous system. It's not that we're calm all the time. It's that we can experience life's ups and downs, but we have tools to come back to our baseline stress. So what are some of the benefits? Well, some of the biggest benefits, I think, that relate to our business is one, when we are in a stress response. So when we're in fight or flight or like a freeze response, again, our body and our nervous system will always prioritize our safety and our survival. So what does that mean? If our body is perceiving some sort of threat and we're in a stress response and we're feeling dysregulated, that means, and I alluded to it earlier, but we don't have access to the part of our brain that is responsible for our executive function. So our highest levels of communication, right? Our ability to analyze, our empathy and our compassion, our creativity, all of that literally goes offline when we're in a stress response, because what use is creativity if you're running from a lion or something? I don't know. Like that's just how we were made, right? So that goes offline. And so many of those skills are what make us incredible women entrepreneurs or female leaders or leaders in our workspace. So when we can learn to regulate our nervous system, we have access to all of those parts of our brain. And we'll also notice massive increases in our energy levels. We'll sleep better. So our circadian rhythm is back on track and our sleep-wake cycle. So we have more energy there. An improvement in our mood. So things like this, irritability will kind of go away. Our stress will dissipate, our anxiety will dissipate, our overwhelm will dissipate. A lot of that fear and that imposter syndrome and all the stories that come with fear will start to dissipate. And then I think one of the greatest pros, I guess, as a business owner is that when you grow in the resilience of your nervous system, that flexibility of your nervous system, you actually increase your bandwidth. So that means that, I mentioned at the beginning all of the roles that I play right now, all the hats that I wear. If you had asked me to do that 10 years ago, forget it. There's no way I would have had the capacity to do all of that. I would have been a mess. I would have been all over the place. It just would not have been good. But because I've been working on my nervous system so much in the last, 5-7 years, I have the capacity to hold all of that without becoming dysregulated. I have the ability to respond instead of react. I have the ability to prioritize well and not live from a place of urgency and hustle. And I have much more balance between We talk about like feminine and masculine energy. I used to be so just driven, and now I can like approach things from such a more feminine space, which has been great for longevity and more sustainability in my businesses. But I think those are some of the biggest benefits business wise to having a regulated nervous system.
And those are huge, right? I mean, those because yeah, like not being able and like the last part there, I think ironically, it's like we want to be able to hold more. So it's like because we're trying to do everything and that, like that unhealthy drive, I guess, to like accomplish and achieve and do all the things. But when you, like you said, when you learn how to regulate, um, then you can do more of those things, but in a healthier way and actually be doing them well, not drop everything. And I like how you said, you started off by talking about how basically how you said we don't get stuck there. Because I think in this kind, and I'm sure you experience this, but in this kind of conversation, it can almost feel like we like that response of freeze or flight or whatever is like a bad thing. And it's like, no, they're there and it's needed and it's telling us something, but like you said, it's not stuck there for
Right.
whatever reason. And when we're constantly stressed, having that perpetual, it's almost like a, I don't say subclinical, but it's there, but it's just like permeating our lives and all the different things that we do. And even as moms, just being moms, like not even business stuff, but just being moms when you're with your kids for extended periods of time, like as a stay-at-home mom, a homeschool mom, then it's like constant, or for me,
Yes.
it's constantly being like triggered potentially, depending on your
Yeah.
kids' personalities and challenges that they have and things. Um, yeah, so that's just really fascinating. So I like that you said that because yeah, it's not about getting rid of our nervous system responses, but it's about that regulation.
That's right. Yeah. 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 I think so often we can put labels on stuff really quickly, right? It's like, I know that that's how I was before I really got into this work. Like I had so many labels and ideas about emotions, like what was strong and what was weak and what was good and what
Mhm.
was bad. And man, unlearning so much of what I thought made me like a really effective attorney or mom or wife or whatever. Unlearning so much of that, I'm like, holy man, that was stuff that was actually holding me back in so
Mhm.
many ways. So what a cool opportunity we all have every day to be like, let me take a closer look at this.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a great conversation. And I would love to know how can people connect with you? I know you said you have a podcast. How can they get in touch with you and learn more about what you are doing?
Sure. So yes, my podcast is the best place. It's called the Calm Mom Podcast. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. I also have a brand new, well, a few months old now, private podcast series called Heal Your Burnout. It's 5 episodes. They're absolutely free. You just need the link to get it. You can get that on my website or at michellegrosser.com/burnout. And it takes you through my 6-step framework to recover from burnout. So you kind of get an idea on what the symptoms are, and then I walk you through a framework to start your recovery. So if that's something that you're curious about or wondering if you're burned out, I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then the episodes are pretty short. They're really actionable, so you can start to have some handles right away to learn how to regulate your nervous system and start to really heal from a place of burnout. Because ultimately, that's not how any of us were created to run and operate and do any of these things from a place of burnout. It's not for us. So I think it can be so empowering to know that there are tools out there that don't require us to spend any money or go out and buy anything, right? These are all things that we can do with our own body to help bring healing. So those are the best places to find me. I'm sometimes on Instagram at michellegrosser.coach, but really try not to spend too much time on there these days. But the podcast is the best place to find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I know this conversation is going to be so valuable to people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all the work, all the good stuff you're putting out there. I really appreciate you.